Welcome to this special edition here on I-24 News, focusing widely on last night's terror attack in Turkey. At least 36 people have been killed and over 140 were injured in a triple suicide bombing at Istanbul's Ataturk airport. The scenes of chaos, including 2 of the detonations, were caught on airport surveillance cameras. The Turkish government was quick to hold the Islamic State group accountable, something that could point to prior intelligence. With me in studio are senior political and security analyst for Haaretz Amir Oren and senior defense correspondent Shai Ben Ari. We'll be with you both in a moment, but first we're going to go to Istanbul, where our contributor Laura Patel is standing by. Laura, good afternoon. What are the reactions coming in today, throughout the day, the aftermath of yesterday's attack?
Everyone here in Turkey is just shocked, horrified, so saddened that there has been yet another terror attack in Turkey. This is the 4th attack alone in Istanbul alone in the last 6 months. I think it's the 8th or 9th major bombing in the country in less than a year. To be honest, it's getting hard to keep up with them, as you can tell.
And what is the general atmosphere at the moment? How is the Turkish public reacting to something that's becoming a routine for them?
What you find in Turkey is that the Turkish public is very polarized. The country is almost split down the middle between those who support the government and those who oppose it. And, you know, the government, not unreasonably says that it is facing an unprecedented number of challenges at the moment. It's got the war of Syria on its border. It's facing a conflict with the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the southeast. It's got a lot on its plate. But of course, its critics say that it really needs to focus much harder on fighting ISIS, perhaps bringing a ceasefire, a ceasefire in the southeast to bring an end to the conflict there, and working harder to disrupt and disable ISIS networks here in Turkey.
And Laura, are we hearing these critics speak up, or are they scared? Because there's been, of course, a crackdown on certain groups, and also legal measures have been taken to give military personnel the backing in light of all these terror attacks. So are we hearing these voices that are telling the government enough is enough? Are these voices being heard in the media, which has also been affected and in many ways silenced during this time?
You're right. Turkey has faced a lot of criticism for crackdown from the media, for prosecutions of journalists, both for the stories they write and also accusing them of insulting the president. There are various ways that journalists have faced pressures on their freedom of expression here. The media in Turkey is very heavily dominated by pro-government channels owned by friendly companies, particularly in TV we're talking, but there is also a vibrant press. There are opposition politicians willing to speak out. So you do hear those voices as well, yes.
Laura Patel, thank you for joining us. We'll be back with you later on for more updates. Here in studio, we'll be discussing all of this, but first, a round of yesterday's deadly attack in this next report by Anna Ehrenheim.
Turkey is blaming the Islamic State group for a triple suicide bombing and gun attack on Istanbul's Ataturk airport, which left at least 36 people dead and dozens more wounded.
Findings by our security forces indicate this terror attack was carried out by Daesh. Even though the findings point to Daesh, the probe is still underway. The airport reopened to air traffic as of 2:22 a.m., and air traffic returned to normal.
The attackers opened fire at the international terminal entrance before blowing themselves up. Police are said to have engaged 2 of the attackers in an attempt to stop them from reaching a security checkpoint, but they detonated their explosives. Footage which emerged on social media appears to show a police officer shooting one of the attackers, who then detonated his explosive belt as he was lying injured on the ground.
We was there and we have to control our baggage, and when we put it on our baggage there, our passport, our bag, all of them, somebody coming and shooting us, and then my sister was running. I don't know which way she was running, and after that I was falling down and I was in the ground till he's finished it.
Turkish authorities stated that while a vast majority of the dead were Turkish nationals, foreigners were also among those who were killed. Ataturk, Turkey's largest airport, is a major transport hub for international travelers, but was long seen as a vulnerable target. While no group has claimed responsibility for Tuesday's attack, it bore striking similarities to the coordinated Islamic State attack on Brussels airport and metro train in March, which killed 32 people.
And these scenes of chaos are becoming all too familiar, and in Turkey specifically, with airports globally becoming a very soft and vulnerable spot for these attacks. What should Turkey be doing at this point? This is their worst in 4 attacks in Istanbul alone this past year.
Well, as was mentioned in the report, every 6 weeks or so, there has been a major attack in Turkey over the last year. If you break down the attacks, you see that most of them take place in Istanbul or Ankara, the capital, or in southeastern Turkey, next to the Kurdish zones, because some of the attacks have been made by the PKK or the other Kurdish organizations, and some by the Islamic State. Now, Turkey is a huge country. They could have picked Izmir or any other place. They focus on either government targets or police, security, and the like, or on aviation and tourist attractions. Because aviation is such a complicated chain that even if you manage to protect one link, let's say the cockpit of the plane is secure, you can't hijack the plane, but you can bomb the plane itself, or you can attack the tarmac, or you can attack the terminal, or the train bringing travelers to the airport. So there is really nothing that Turkey or any other country can do defensively. What it can do is what Israel did 14 years ago when it went on Operation Defensive Shield. You must hit the terrorists in their home base. For Turkey to do that, it must send ground troops to attack the Islamic State in Syria and in Iraq, along with the coalition. This is against their policy, or at least has been against their policy up to now, but we have seen over the last few days that Erdogan has tried to shift his policy vis-à-vis both Israel and Russia. So who knows, maybe in the near future we will see Turkey doing a U-turn and deciding to join the coalition. And even though this will help Assad indirectly, and Assad being Erdogan's rival, nevertheless, the paramount security interest of Turkey is to get rid of the Islamic State.
To get rid of the Islamic State, it's important to note no one has claimed responsibility, but all fingers are pointing at the Islamic State, and the government released a statement very shortly afterwards, something they usually don't do. It usually takes hours, even days. Why do you think they were so quick to blame Islamic State in this attack? Because we know that some of the other attacks have also been claimed by PKK affiliates.
Right. Well, first of all, the target, we're talking about an international hub, again, an airport, and that seems to strike, the tourist industry in Turkey that traditionally, we'll call, if you can call it tradition, that has not tended to be the target of attacks by the Kurdish groups, which tend to target the military or police. Also, there are technical similarities to specifically the case of the Brussels airport attack. We're, again, talking about 3 terrorists who arrived in a taxi. That's one thing. They were using Kalashnikovs and 3 separate suicide bombings. That's another link there. And there's also another connection in terms of, that sort of exploitation of a certain weak link in the security chain, which I think you could speak specifically about the entrances to the arrival and departure halls, which seem to be a problem around the world. Both the airport in Brussels and, of course, Ataturk Airport were certainly known to be potential targets.
Absolutely. Do we have reason to believe that the authorities had previous intelligence, since they did come out so quickly to blame the Islamic State, if they knew something and maybe they're holding some of that information from the public?
No, usually what happens is that intelligence agencies pick up chatter. They know that the organization are trying to speak and the volume rises about something which is going to be done. They don't know the exact date or the exact target, but they can know that this happened, by the way, before the Egyptian plane was blown up. This is apparently what the Israeli intelligence agencies picked up. They didn't know what exactly was going to be done. But regarding the Ataturk airport, what happened over the last several years was that Turkish Airlines has become a major airline. It used to be a very local airline, and Turkey was the focus of bilateral aviation relations.
I think the 10th busiest airport in the world today.
And Turkish Airlines, specifically, the airline itself, has become a major airline serving the world, and therefore it has become a more attractive target because obviously this is the major airline serving Ataturk Airport.
Now, Shah, you mentioned the tactics of the attack itself that are very similar to Brussels, and it's interesting to note that the fact that the militants came in probably hoping to shoot down security guards so they could come in and detonate themselves actually saved lives. Apparently, one of the detonations caught on camera shows one of the attackers being shot down. Maybe we can show these visuals now behind us. And he's seen shot down, and people are running in all directions. And when he detonates himself, a lot less damage is done. Maybe no one is even hurt badly from that specific detonation.
Yeah, perhaps unfortunate circumstances there. But again, we're talking about a problem in Turkey. I think it can be seen as something of a way station for the movement of jihadists.
Here we're now just seeing the video behind us.
It's very dramatic footage indeed.
Dramatic footage. We're seeing the attacker shot by the security guard. So him coming in with a rifle initially didn't work to the attacker's advantage. Minutes later, he detonates himself, and there's a lot of damage done to the structure, but hopefully the people did manage to run.
Sometimes they wait for the first responders to arrive. This is what happened at the Beilid junction here in Israel in 1995. There is a first detonation. People are hurt. Some are killed, some are wounded. Ambulances come pouring in, and then the secondary explosion takes place. So sometimes, and this is, of course, the hallmark of Al-Qaeda and other such organizations, these double suicide bombings. You wait for others to arrive, and then you detonate yourself so as to cause maximum fatalities.
Indeed, and all this is taking place amid the reconciliation agreement between Israel and Turkey. The Israeli cabinet just approved the deal. The vote was held this morning, and they've just released their statement. We're now going to go live to Istanbul, where our correspondent Mohammed El-Qassem is standing by. He was at the airport. Mohammed, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Mohammed, tell us, one day after the airport has gone back to full operation, we know in Brussels it took much longer than that. What are the feelings there on the ground?
Well, let's start by saying that it's not full operation. It's about 70 to 75% operation working at the Ataturk airport here in Istanbul. One of the main reasons why it was so quick to reopen again, because the attackers, the assailants, were outside the security posts. They were not able to get into the departure terminal. They were stopped by police, and that was one of the main reasons why there was minimum casualties. As high as it is, there was minimum casualties, and also the attack took place right outside the departure terminal. I can tell you with great confidence that there is high alert. The city is on high alert. We have seen a large number of security forces around the airport and around the city. We actually landed in Sabiha Airport, which is the other large airport here in the city, and we drove into Istanbul, and we drove into the Ataturk airport, and I can tell you that there is a large number of security.
So you're seeing a much larger amount of security, which of course would be expected. Did you manage to speak to any of the people coming to the airport today? Feelings of fear, feelings of shock still the day after?
I can tell you that we spoke to a couple of people, and we also spoke to the taxi driver that brought us here to the airport, and they were shocked that this kind of attack is taking place here in Istanbul. They told us that they believe, for two reasons, that they didn't think that this would happen now. These are the last 10 days of the holy month of Ramadan, and they didn't think anyone would even dare to commit or plan such a bloody, ruthless attack on the city on these last 10 days of the holy month of Ramadan. Also, they didn't think that with high security as it is in the city, this isn't the first attack that took place here in Istanbul. Istanbul in the last few months has been the the scene of more than one attack, whether it's the PKK or it's the Islamic State organization. There has been security distributed around the city in high numbers. So they did not think that such an attack would actually take place here in the city, let alone at the airport, where it normally has large number of security forces distributed around the airport.
And also we know there are metal detectors on the entrance to the airport, which doesn't even exist here in Tel Aviv, but we'll be talking about the further measures that they might be taking. Mohammed El-Qassem, we will be back with you later today. Thanks for now. The airport security, which we mentioned briefly earlier, I also got an update now that the death toll has risen to 41. These are the new numbers being released from the Turkish authorities, with the injured rising to 239. So initially, this attack was seen as on a much smaller scale. It's learning and turning out to be something of great impact.
But there is a delicate balance between security and travel. You cannot get to the unbearable point where people will stay in line 5, 6, 10 hours to get to the plane.
Indeed,
because
but the focus today is on luggage, the focus today is on shoes. When will the focus be on the entrance or even prior to the entrance?
But what can you do? You can only make the point where the suicide bomber detonates himself somewhere else. Let's say you do all that at the center of the city before you board a bus or a train to the plane. This will become the new place to detonate oneself. So it doesn't really make sense. What you have to do is profile, try to see, and it's very difficult in a place like Turkey because the perpetrators do not seem any different than the general population. You must have better intelligence and you must go on the offense. Otherwise, you will keep getting more and more attacks. You will absorb more terror acts.
And you'll continue to be a target. And Shai, if you want to comment on that.
I agree. The solution, if there is a solution, and it's not to be taken for granted that there is one, would be really, I think, to crack down on the movement of weaponry, of means of carrying out the actual attacks in terms of the ability of citizens or people freely getting their hands on them. It's comparable to a certain situation that does exist in Israel where it is harder. It is factually harder for people to get their hands on serious kinds of weaponry. You have all sorts of cases of improvised weapons, of knives, of certain improvised sub-automatic machine guns being used in terror attacks in Israel, but we're talking about a much lower level of casualty rates. On June,
rules, higher intel, and also specifically with the airport in Israel, there's a checkup already 2 kilometers beforehand. I do want to talk about...
You have the insider threat problem where the organizations can co-opt people who work at the airport and who already wear security badges. And this happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, for instance, with the Egyptian plane. So if they manage to recruit people who already passed these inspections, it's much easier for them.
That's, of course, a very big danger. And Turkey has also been seen as the gateway for ISIS fighters from being recruited from Europe and around the world, going to Syria. How are they protecting their borders today, and what are they doing to clamp down on this?
In that context, it's interesting that it came out today that earlier this month there was an arrest made at Ben Gurion International Airport here in Israel on June 10th. An Arab-Israeli citizen, 23-year-old Ibrahim Akbaria, was in fact sent back from Turkey, where he had already been arrested in the city of Gaziantep after apparently making some sort of contact with Islamic State. That city, and Turkey in general, you could say, is something of a hub now for Islamist activity. From his interrogation emerged that this is another classic case of an individual, a youth, being exposed to radical extremist online propaganda and then seeking to join up with Islamic State in Syria. He didn't make it all the way to Syria, but there have been plenty of cases of Israelis who have managed.
Who did?
The key is they're usually not able to come all the way back to Israel, certainly not with the kind of weaponry that they perhaps can get their hands on in Syria. They perhaps have that knowledge. They perhaps have a certain knowledge of locations and targets in Israel. But in Israel, you have a situation where Islamic State has not been able to carry out any sort of similar level of attack.
Now, to talk more about the airport security, we're joined on the phone by Pini Schiff, former director of the security division at Ben Gurion Airport, which we just mentioned. Thank you for joining us, Pini. A highly secured airport, Ataturk Airport in Istanbul, yet it remains a very soft target. What should the Turkish authorities be doing?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? I didn't hear you well.
Sorry, it's a highly secured airport, although it's a very, very large one, yet it's a soft target. What should Turkish authorities be doing based on your expertise here in Israel and at the Tel Aviv airport?
Well, first of all, security measure doesn't provide 100% safety and security. I mean, it's impossible to protect an airport 100%. You can put measures from different kinds, but as we can see, what happened in Brussels and yesterday evening in Istanbul, you see that the terror organization succeeded in its act. Therefore, if you put more manpower, it doesn't provide you, or it doesn't ensure you that nothing will happen in the future.
Absolutely. Now, Shai in studio mentioned the cooperation between Turkey and Israel as just these past few weeks, an Israeli Arab citizen was stopped allegedly attempting to join the lines of IS. We know Turkey has been a gateway for IS fighters. What can Israel offer in this regard?
First of all, I don't know whether the Turk government will approach Israel in order to have any suggestion how to protect the airport much better than it's done today. The Turks are putting a lot of efforts for many years in order to protect the airport, and therefore what happened yesterday shows you that even though you have many soldiers and policemen and other security staff at the airport, you can't close the area 100% in order to avoid such a terror act.
And what kind of cooperation does exist already between airport security, specifically Turkey? We know that Israel has offered a lot of their technologies in the airport as well as training to other countries. What exists at the moment, and what would you suggest as an expert for the Ataturk airport to do, knowing that they're still vulnerable?
Listen, 3 weeks ago, the Israel Airport Authority had a seminar, and 150 people from different countries, from the States, from Europe, from Africa, were invited to take part in this seminar in order to learn, in order to see, in order to watch what we in Ben Gurion Airport are doing in order to protect the airport. Now, I can tell you, they were astonished from what we are doing, and we showed them in a few drills that were made in the second day, how can we react to different terror acts. Now, the question is whether they can adapt the Israeli philosophy of security in order to do it in their countries. I doubt it.
It's if they're if they're able to and if they want to. Pini Schiff, I want to thank you at this point for your analysis and insight.
May I add?
Absolutely, Amir.
What Pini Schiff talked about, the seminar, took place or started on the day of the terror act at the Sarona market, on that Wednesday a couple of weeks ago. I happened to be on a flight from Madrid to Tel Aviv, and in the next seat was a security professional from one of the bigger airports in Spain. And he has talked in such profound admiration of the Israeli security system at the airports, because he and his colleagues were coming to learn from Israel.
And we know that also the different screenings have been adapted, and the intel is actually the human is actually the most probably important factor, which we know that Israel is very good and leading in this respect. I want to talk to you a little bit about the condemnations coming from around the world? Because this seems to be, we're a bit short on time, but this seems to be a global pattern.
A global pattern, yes. We're talking about, basically, we're talking about a situation where you have jihadists seeking to come back to their home countries and carry out attacks. This is a problem, I think, around the world, not just in Ataturk, which I think would have been perceived as a very potentially hazardous target in terms of a terrorist threat, and therefore it's particularly disappointing that this happened at such an obvious target, and also Brussels was the same case. But I think this really needs to be addressed, and there may be no other choice in terms of concern for your own citizens' safety in adapting a more approach that is more similar to the one common here in Israel when it comes to security. And there are obviously more controversial aspects to it. For example, racial profiling, which to a certain level does exist at Israeli terminals, and that is something that perhaps would not be accepted in other countries.
At this point, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Shai Ben-Ari and Amir Oren. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back here soon to talk further about the aftermath of yesterday's attack. Don't go anywhere.